All right, hey guys. I've been trying to put my baby to sleep for the last 2 hours, but she keeps fighting her nap, so hopefully I can get through this video before she wakes up for the 20th time. First, this video we're going to go over Aperture. This explains it pretty well, but for those of you who need more of an auditory source as well as visual, I'm going to explain it a little bit further. So, Aperture, let's go into Photoshop here. Oop, let's hide all of this nonsense because we need to go at it a little bit at a time. All right, so aperture, basically like I mentioned before, is how small or big the opening of your lens is. And in that little camera animation, it's just the hole inside your camera. It's what lets light in. So not to get all super technical, but your aperture is controlled by these, what we call f-stops, all right? Where it gets confusing is you would think the more light you're letting in, the bigger the number would be, but it's actually the opposite. So the more light you're letting in, the smaller the f-stop, but we call it wide open. And then the smaller your lens hole is, the bigger the f-stop you have. So f22 is about how high most lenses go. So now, if we look here, we have our sun and our moon, our beautiful drawing here, and we have a meter. We'll go over what your meter does in your camera in a different video. But, so the wider your aperture is, the more sun you let in. The smaller your aperture is, the less light you let in. Okay, that's pretty easy peasy, right? So, what this controls also is what we call your depth of field. So, your depth of field, in a nutshell, so let's find our camera here, is how much of your image is in focus. So if you have a aperture of 2.8, you're probably not going to have a whole lot of depth of field, okay? Your depth of field is going to be pretty shallow. If you have a depth of field, a greater depth of field, let's say f22, most of your image is going to be in focus. So for instance, if you have f22, you have your person and your ground, your mountains, most of that's probably going to be in focus. If you have something like 2.8, your person's going to be in focus, but your mountains and your ground are going to be a little bit blurry. So that's basically depth of field. So let me explain that with our example on the website. So if you look here, f11 is going to be a very small hole. So we're going to see more. We see the Vibrant Health text, and then we even see the Classico here. But whenever our lens gets wider, we get a shallower depth of field. So Vibrant Health is in focus, but you can't see the Classico anymore. Okay, so the wider your depth of field, meaning the smaller your number, you start leading yourself into issues with focus. So if you look here, I'm shooting with a 2.8 here, and Nala is in focus, but I am not really. Okay, so there's my husband shooting me right there. And then here we also have, I'm in focus pretty much, but Nala is not. So that's kind of what you, let's adopt a pet, my bad. All right, let's go back here. So if you look here, he's in focus. Nala's not in focus. Baby is crying. One moment. Okay, sorry. Baby was crying. Let's move on. Passy fell out, so we put Passy back in. She's back to sleep. Now, if we look here at the picture of my actual baby, it looks like it's in focus here, right? But if you zoom in, her eye's not in focus and the side of her head is. So whenever you have a wide open aperture, you kind of run into this problem here. You have to be really, really careful with how you're focusing and making sure your single point focus is actually on the part that you need to be focused on. Here's an example of beautiful bokeh. So we have the grasses, in focus, but the background is nice and blurry. The exact opposite here where the subject is further away and the grass is not in focus here. All right, I hope that explains it a little bit easier. If not, shoot me an email and we can discuss it further.